gonna remove the alternator. So we're gonna start by taking the serpentine belt off. I have a ratchet on here with a 16 millimeter or a 5/8, and we're gonna release the tension on this. And this belt is a double ribbed belt, so it's ribbed on both sides. So it's kind of weird. So we're gonna try and get this belt off on this thing. And all right, so we're just gonna roll that off for now. Take this off, and you know, all you guys got your phones out there, so you know, you got to take a picture of where this belt is routing, then you should do so. And we're going to take the rest of the stuff off. So just for now, we're just going to kick this to the side, and we're going to remove the alternator. We're going to disconnect the battery, obviously, before we do that. I have a 9/16 wrench to take off the cable, and then there's this one has a 3/4 inch wrench to disconnect the negative. So we've got the battery disconnected. We're going to set that stuff up here. And we're going to we need a couple of 13s and a 15 to remove this brackets here. And then we're going to unbolt the alternator. So we're going to get a wrench set up for that. We also, on the back of the alternator, we're going to get a screwdriver and peel this back. We have a boot here to pull off. That should be like a 7/16. All right, so we're going to start taking this bracket off back here. We get some 13s and 15s. I peeled the rubber boot back here, and we have the battery disconnected, and this is a 7/16. And we're going to try and get our gear wrench on here, if at all possible. And when you know it's a 10 millimeter. All right. These are T50s for the front of these. Try and crack these loose. Front of the alternator here. Some 15s and 13s on the back side for this bracket here. And man, some of this is 9/16, some of it's 13, some of it's 15s. It's weird. You know, it's that in between year. Not used to, you know, everything's metric now, you know. So, all right, let me get a 10 and a 9/16 for this, and we'll get this off. All right, so we got our 10 on there. Boy, trying not to break anything. Everything's 30 years old on this thing, you know. That don't seem like it wants to move. So we're gonna take this bracket off. Some of the stuff is 9/16, some of it's metric, some of it's 15, 10s. These are the crossover years, so it's kind of all over the place. So. Obviously isn't coming off. Look at 15. Yeah, this one's a 9/16. Back to 13s over here for this one. We're going to be able to hold this with a pair of vice grips so that we're not going to break the inside of the alternator. I need to stop this from turning to crack this 10 millimeter loose here. And we may be able to grab it with a pair of pliers, but let's see if we can grab that. Right now we have another T50 Torx bit over here with a 15 millimeter. So we're going to take that off. Okay, crack this loose first. Okay. Keep these bolts together. Okay, we can lift up the alternator, pry it up here, and we got a little clip here that we're going to take off. Our little pocket screwdriver. Okay, that came off. It's not attached to anything. So we need to hold this so that we don't break the alternator. And then there's a jam nut on the inside of this 10 that we're going to have to tighten. So let's grab some pliers. We're going to hold this and then see if we can crack that 10mm loose. That thing is not wanting to move. Let's see what other route we can go here. Alright, that kind of goes. You don't want to break the inside of the alternator by twisting this stud here. So now that we got this off, we'll end up, see, this is just a part of the alternator, so we didn't want to twist this stud in there. So we got it off, so we're good. Put a little dielectric grease on it and we put it together. Now we can wiggle the alternator. We got a plug over here that we can pry our plug out here with the screwdriver. This is for your regulator. Okay, so that's unplugged. Now we got the alternator to swing up. Now there's a bushing in here that's holding this thing on, and we're gonna have to pry this up to get this off. Okay. Alright, now this brown bushing right here, what we're going to do is we're going to take a hammer and we're going to tap in on this before we put the alternator back on, and it's just going to slide it over, and that's going to give us room to put the alternator back in. Then as we tighten the bolt up, it'll draw the bushing back into the alternator and it'll be fine. So we'll put penetrating oil on this, give it a few taps so it moves in, and it'll just make it a lot easier to go back together. Now we tapped on the thing over here, and we have room now that we can drop our alternator back in place. And we're gonna put the alternator back in place, and it fits right in here right now. Now we have to pry this off before, and now we have room to kind of play around with it a little bit. So lift it up. Let's try and get our pin in place here for the pivot. Okay, and on the bottom side we had our regulator, and then everything's tight in here. This was all tucked down just like this, so we can plug our regulator in right now. That's in. This goes on here, and then we had our bolt that's gonna go down in place right here for this, and then this sits on here. So we got a bolt that comes in the back here that we're gonna, this is all still loose so we can wiggle everything around. We're gonna catch this bolt first, and we have our nut right here for the back. We'll just slip this on loose. So we're gonna catch all of the bolts on this alternator loose before we tighten anything up. So we got a bolt for the bracket here, we got one over here, and then we'll put our line on at the end. Now remember, we had a hard time with this line. We held this with the pliers so we wouldn't break this on the inside of the alternator. So we're gonna be a little careful with that. So let's get the rest of the bolts for this thing here. Now remember, this one went up to the front here. I guess we're putting this thing on next. Let's tighten that up. get our boot on it. Because the boot is stopping us from putting that bracket on. And that's just a little 10 millimeter. We obviously still have our battery disconnected. And then we want to slide our booty up over. Okay. This clip is just, yeah, it just clipped on like that to hold that on there. That's it. It's not really doing anything. I don't know why it's on there, but got one there. This one goes into the compressor side here. These are all the same length. This one drops down into the intake right here. And this last one comes up into the alternator here. I believe we said these were 45s. I'll double check for you. So we're gonna tighten this, and these 3 bolts up right now. We've already got this on in place. So we're tightening up the last of the alternator bolts, and the harness tucks down nice and snug behind the valve cover over here. This is a 9/16 bolt. This is a 9/16 head. This one's a 13. They're all the same length. 13 goes into the alternator. We tighten down our T. What are these, 45s or 50s? And the eyes are getting 50. So T50 for this. We tighten this one down. We tighten this one down and press that bushing back in nice and tight. So we got our clip plugged in over here. Slip the serpentine belt on right now. Tony got a new belt for it, so we might as well get the belt on it. And this was a, I believe a 15 down here on the tensioner. So we're gonna go grab that set up and get the belt back on this. All right, so we had a hard time getting it over the alternator and must have had it off of just one of the belts, one of the grooves a little bit. And Tony helped me, pull on it, and we pulled this over here and rolled it over the power steering pump last. It should have rolled over this one last, but it's a new belt, it's probably a little stiff, so we got it all on place right now, and that's the routing. It shows you on the sticker over here for the routing. Tony took a picture of that. So when we go to start this thing up, we'll just click it, make sure everything's turning nice and smooth before it fires off, and everything looks good with it. So the belt's on.